We have all had painful events in our lives that can lead to depression, anxiety, addiction, or broken relationships. But here's a secret. It is not about what happened to us that causes suffering. It's the stories we believe about ourselves. Join us as we shine light on how to rewrite our stories, avoid the shadows of shame, and travel along the pathway to joy, love, and connection. It's the Finding Peace podcast with your host, Amazon best-selling author, Troy L. Love.
If you're a follower of this podcast, you will have noticed that an episode hasn't been recorded for several months. Part of that is because I've been dealing with recovering from COVID. I've also been on vacation and the holidays, and a lot of different things have been happening both at my regular professional counseling job as well as trying to figure out what direction we are going with the Finding Peace Consulting company. And so I just want to apologize that there haven't been as many episodes as I would like to have. I'm rectifying that now by making an episode today. One of the things that we're hoping to do is to be able to create seasons of the Finding Peace podcast. As I've been listening to some of my favorite podcasts, I've noticed that they have seasons with episodes in the season, and then the season ends, and then there's a break. And I've thought, wow, that is really great, because part of me has thought, well, I am supposed to make a podcast episode every week for the rest of my life. And every time that I don't, my judge starts to creep up on me and tap me on the shoulder and remind me how lousy I am and what kind of a lousy podcast host I am. And I'm dealing pretty well with handling those shadows of shame now, and I'm able to recognize what's going on. But I do recognize that it is true that a podcast episode hasn't been made. So we're making some changes. I have a buddy of mine who's going to be producing the show, and you'll meet him in a future podcast episode. But I wanted to just let you know that I'm still here and we are still working on creating Finding Peace podcast content. One of the things that is really helpful, though, is if my listeners are willing to submit questions that I can answer around how to find more peace, joy, and love in their lives. And the easiest way to send a question is by emailing me at troy@troylove.com. That actually helps, because I don't know if this happens to you, but I run out of stories. I can't think of more stories to tell unless I'm listening to a podcast and it jogs my memory, or somebody asks a question and then it helps me remember, oh, there's a story that I could tell around that. So if you have a question about how to find more peace or joy or love in your life, I would love for you to submit that question. Again, the email address is troy@troylove.com. My family and I have been on vacation. It's the first vacation that I took for the last 2 years. And we came back from the vacation, and I came back to work, and there was a golden box with my name on it waiting for me as one of the packages that had come over the holiday break. And I wondered, where did this come from? We are in the process of moving offices, and so I've been buying some furniture and some other things, and so we've been getting a lot of Amazon packages lately, but none of them were wrapped in golden wrapping paper, but the address was printed, not written. And so it made me wonder, where's this from? Is this a gift that somebody sent? What is happening? I opened up the box and immediately recognized that it was paraphernalia from my childhood. And right on the top of the box was a picture of me kissing my mother on the cheek with my grandparents standing next to me at some kind of Valentine's Day event. And I knew immediately that this was information and paraphernalia and pictures and different things that my mom had sent to me. And my gut reaction was, something has happened. Getting this box kind of out of the blue with no heads up just kind of made me be a little suspicious. So then I checked my email, and I hadn't checked my email for a week, and I don't know about you, but when I've been on vacation, I dread checking my email when I come back because the amount of endless emails that I have to go through to kind of clean things up. But in there is an email from my mom, and my mom says, I was listening to your Finding Peace podcast with a friend of mine. It was very interesting. And my heart sank, and I thought to myself, oh, she probably listened to one of the episodes where I'm talking about some of the events of my childhood. And so I called her and I talked to her on the phone, and she said, I was really, really interested about the way that you portray our childhood. Do you really feel like your childhood was that awful? And I said, Mom, there were some very challenging things that happened growing up. There really were some really challenging things. Growing up in a home with domestic violence can really affect a kid. And there were other things that were happening in my life that did have nothing to do with being at home, but growing up in a home where there was a lot of violence did affect me. And yeah, so there were some really challenging parts. And she said, well, I sent you the box because I wanted you to remember some of the happy memories of your life. I wanted you to remember that there were happy parts of your life. And I said, Mom, I'm grateful for that. And there were really happy memories. The challenge that I have is that I've blocked out a lot of my childhood, good and bad. I've blocked out a lot of it, so I don't remember a whole lot of anything. So getting the pictures and the paraphernalia was really wonderful because it jogged my memory and reminded me of some fun events that I had growing up. I said, so it wasn't all bad. And I want you to know that it wasn't all bad. And I also want you to know that I don't hate you or judge you or hold any animosity whatsoever for the past. The past is in the past. And we talked a little bit more about, what my childhood was like and the childhood that my kids are growing up in. And I said, I need you to know that my kids do not live in a perfect house. Like their parents, me especially, make a lot of mistakes. And my kids are experiencing wounds too. So I am not trying to blame or hold animosity or resentment towards you at all, Mom. The truth is, those things happened, and they did create wounds for me. I have wounds of loss, I have wounds of neglect, I have wounds of abuse, and I have wounds of abandonment. They are deep. And although I've done a lot of work around those wounds, they still are there, and they get activated from time to time. And sometimes I handle it really well, and sometimes I do not handle it well at all. But I told my mom I wouldn't change anything that has happened to me in the past. And that's a question that I sometimes ask my clients, and sometimes people ask me, is like, if you could go back in time, is there anything you would change? And as I go back in time, there are some moments that I would change the way that I responded to some things that would be different. But truthfully, as I look at my life, I realize, no, I would not change anything. Because everything that happened to me, whether it was positive or whether it was negative, helped me become the man that I am today. Helped me to learn to be more loving and compassionate and less judgmental. Has led me to create a model that has helped thousands of people find greater peace and joy in their lives. Has led me to be more compassionate to myself when I slip and fall and make mistakes and don't behave the way that I want to behave. And instead of the shadows of shame just raging on me and beating me up, I've been able to learn how to be resilient to those, and I've been able to understand why they are there. I've been able to understand the healing that can come from attachment wounds. and the way that boundaries can be established when one person begins to believe that they are worthy of love and belonging. And so I told my mom, "Mom, I'm really glad that those things happened to me. And I want you to know that. I am grateful for my past. I'm grateful for my mom, and I'm grateful for my dad, and I'm grateful for my birth mother and the choices she made in order to bring me into the world. I'm grateful for the angels who've been in my life, the neighbor ladies who would bake cookies with me and help me feel so loved and welcome, my grandma and grandpa who loved me wholeheartedly, my aunts and uncles, my cousins that were a wonderful part of my childhood, my friends growing up. There were beautiful, beautiful parts of my life that I wouldn't change. And there was also pain, which really goes down to the premise of finding peace, that yin and yang right in the middle. Pain and peace go together. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot have peace and joy and love if you have not experienced pain, because you don't fully recognize the beauty and the light and the magnificence of the joy and the peace. You don't comprehend it, you don't have the gratitude for it, you don't really understand the need for it if you have never experienced pain. And so they go together. I'm grateful that I have the painful experiences in my life. They've taught me how to become a better person. They've led me to build relationships with people that matter to me. So as we get ready for 2022, a year that I'm hoping will not be as challenging as the last 2 years have been, I also am reminded that we have to lean into the discomfort, and on the other end of that, we find peace.
You've been listening to the Finding Peace podcast. If you loved the show or want to ask a question, let us know by going to troylove.com. There, you can also learn about the Finding Peace 5-Day Challenge. Remember to subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss the next episode. And if you are listening on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating. It helps other people find this podcast more easily. Thank you for spending part of your journey with us. Copyright Finding Peace Consulting.